the prior one, which is why I thought, okay,
So it's something like the level of restrictiveness? Okay.
okay. And then also, in the next paragraph, I think, oh no, I'm sorry, down under reports from council liaison.
I'm sorry, just one moment.
Again, this is really just a clarification.
Where are we now again? Oh, under reports from council.
Yeah.
Okay.
The last sentence, it says she noted the Wald Group would be working with Councilmember Cole and herself to figure out the next steps and mentioned the first meeting will take place on the 15th. Was that about the community center?
Yes.
Yeah, it wasn't about the lot split or anything.
No, it was not.
Okay, just to make sure that they're,
Oh, yeah,
Clear.
that's true, because it's not clear in that statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also on page 5
that's all I had.
That's good 5, okay.
of the, I think it's,
Anybody have anything else? They were,
yeah, so where it says, right under the commission business action items and recommendations, where it says council liaison Wong Snowy project is not currently funded, but it's looking for into possible grants. Not sure, I don't think I said that. That wasn't my intent, at least I.
yeah, I don't think, yeah, I don't remember that exactly.
So to clarify, what I would say is that the Snowy project, well, at this time, the Snowy project then was not being funded by the business or partner. We weren't partnering with the business association around funding. So we were looking at alternative modes.
Right.
Of,
Essentially, you're looking at funding.
yeah.
Okay, anybody else? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the November 3rd minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Patrick,
Second.
second by John. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All righty, those are done. Nobody here from the public. Do we know if there's anybody on Zoom?
There is none.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. We have no public hearings, so we're right down to commission business action items and recommendations. And I'll wait as our member arrives. We'll give him a chance to get up here. That's okay. We'll say you got stuck in traffic, right?
I did.
Yeah, there you go. I'm not surprised.
In there today. Started a new job and it's a longer drive, so.
Oh. Well, you got here just in time, because we're just getting to the business action items and recommendations.
Perfect.
All right. First item is, well, why don't we do the amendment first? The sign ordinance thing first? Is that okay with everyone? I probably should have done that before we passed the agenda, but let's do that.
Would
That
you
would-
like me to pull it up on the screen?
If you can, if we're good to get it up for the viewing public.
Oh, look, it's up there.
Oh, and it's on our screen,
It's on
too.
both screens.
Excellent.
It's supposed to be.
Oh, it says you are muted. Killing me softly.
That's probably okay.
Well, we can listen to it.
Background music.
That's right.
Tune.
That's gone now.
You should at least
Is your
listen
mic
to
on, or just be sure you're,
Need to start talking into it, but it's
Yes.
way over here and my computer's over here.
yeah, it doesn't project all that well for some reason.
How about now?
It's on.
It's on? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to present yet again on the sign ordinance. So if you'll recall at our last meeting, we discussed a couple of amendments related to definitions, how we measure the sign area, and then multi-tenant signs. And so what you have in your packet is the proposed ordinance language, as we talked about, kind of verbatim. So if you want to go through those one by one, we can do that. Why is that happening? Okay. Nobody's even in the meeting, so maybe I could close this meeting, or I'll just leave
They
it.
might show up.
Well, that little thing in the corner is not a problem.
Okay. Okay, so if you recall, sign face was not included in the definitions. It was elsewhere in the ordinance, so we just grabbed it and moved it. So the language hasn't changed, it's just been relocated. As that's actually what Section 2 is about. It's moving that language from sign area measurement and putting it up into the sign face. So then we get down to the multi-tenant signs, where we discuss removing the master sign plan requirement and clarifying the area of wall sign coverage that can be allowed per each tenant. And so what we now are suggesting is that tenants can have up to one wall sign for every building face that they hold a lease over, up to 20% of that leasehold area.
Does that need to say leasehold area of the wall face? As opposed to leasehold area, which could mean square foot area in plan view.
I think the intent is what
The
you're
intent
saying.
is wall face.
The intent is wall face of that area that is leased.
For each
I mean,
facade.
It's understandable that that's what our intent is. The question is, could someone say, well, my lease is 20,000 square feet?
I'm not arguing. I'm just trying to clarify how we
Yeah.
can improve the language.
I'm wondering if that shouldn't be more specific to leasehold wall area
I think that does it.
on which, because you say on which the sign, but it's one of those things that somebody could make an argument if they wanted to.
So wall signs shall be limited to no more than 20% of the leasehold wall area on which that sign is to be
Yes.
erected. Okay. And that's clarifying. Okay. I think that's a good
I
modification.
like that anyway because it says wall signs, so it's plural, and you can only have one per wall. So it was one of those. Okay, are we talking about how much wall are we talking about?
Right.
So yeah, I like that.
And then for all other signage on the site, we agreed that it would be the same as what is in the table up above, related to every other site within the district in which it's located. So I think if memory serves, it's like 300 square feet for a MU district. Okay.
And that would take care of if they had, if the owner of the entire property had
Yeah.
signage of some kind too.
Something that just came up this week, actually, I have had an inquiry on a potential new business in a multi-tenant situation, and that caused me to look at all of this a little bit more closely. And I like what we've done with the 20% and what this proposal is, but when we look at the wall sign requirements for every other building in the city, we make it a third of the wall area. Or maybe that's window area. Let me pull it
I
open.
think that's window area.
Okay. It just had me thinking a little bit about how do we make sure that these all align. But it seemed as though these new provisions are actually going to work in the case that I'm working with. So
Good.
I think this is favorable in terms of at least this particular person that potentially comes into the city. The other sign change was related to non-permanent freestanding signs. And if you recall, that we had that issue with a city-sponsored sign being located too close to the street. And so we had some discussions at the past two planning commission meetings, and we landed on, we would allow such signs to be set up to 2 feet to the curb as long as they are smaller than 4 square feet. All others would still have to adhere to the 10-foot
Scroll
setback.
to that portion on there just in case.
Oh, it's there. Can you not see it?
Yeah, it's under section 4 there.
Oh, there, I'm
Yep,
sorry.
C, and then 6, yep.
I didn't see you move it, so I
Oh,
was
sorry.
thinking it was the same thing. Yeah.
Any other questions or discussion on any of these items?
Just to refresh my memory, what qualifies as a non-permanent sign, or what's the duration of a non-permanent?
We don't have a duration.
Okay.
And if it can be physically moved, I'd have to double check what the actual ordinance states in terms of the definition.
It's
which I-
easily
Yeah.
easily moved, so it's not like
Yeah, if you've got a,
permanent in the
Right.
ground.
Install it.
Foundation.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But, and do I remember right that we really can't require them now to take the signs down? Is that what the
we,
rules are now?
we don't have any provisions that say, because we don't have a duration, we can't lean on them in that way. But in terms of maintenance, if it starts to look like it's no longer functional, then we can have them take it down.
That was the one thing that I was just thinking about, was what was to keep somebody from, putting up a temporary sign but never taking it down.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Maybe you could,
Pull
do
it.
you have the ordinance available where you could bring up the maintenance part? Because we actually did list some things that
yeah.
that
I thought we
relate to the
had, but I
maintenance
just-
aspect.
I was trying to remember off my faulty memory.
Yeah, yeah. Starts to look raggedy, although we
Yeah.
use better language
Yeah,
than
but
that.
that's essentially what it says.
Right.
Let's see, where is the maintenance?
Or, I don't remember if complaints from other residents was an issue. I don't think it was.
Fine line we gotta go,
Yeah, that's a tricky one to
Sure is.
straddle,
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause
which is why we didn't do the duration, because that's just,
Right,
Why is their sign up? Why is mine down?
yeah.
Okay, here's the maintenance requirement. All signs and components thereof shall be kept in good repair and in a safe, neat, clean, and attractive condition and in compliance with all applicable building code requirements.
and I think we say something else, somewhere else in there. Is that like in the beginning?
I'm not sure, what are we looking for?
I think under like wish I had it with me, like under the general regulations now that apply to all signs, I think there's something in there because it applies to all signs, including temporary.
That's where I'm looking, is the
Oh, okay.
the maintenance is under the general regulations,
Okay,
is item H,
okay.
and there was 3 headings under there. So I think it was really that H1 is probably what we're leaning against.
The one thing I'm thinking about, and believe me, I do not want to make regulations any more difficult than they are, but just, do we have a way of prescribing a permanent sign? Let's say somebody sets up a sewing service, Sue's Sewing Service sets up a 4 square foot temporary sign on her front lawn, but never takes it down, never doesn't have it there. The sign gets tatty, she puts another one up. Do we have anything that says, after, you need to make this a permanent sign?
No, I think that
Do we
was
care?
intentionally discussed maybe before
Yeah.
you were on the commission?
Yeah,
If-
I think
Okay.
probably was, so.
Yeah. We talked a lot about how do you pick and choose?
Yeah, all right,
Then it really does start to get arbitrary.
yeah,
Yeah, I think the spirit of this overall ordinance update was to try to streamline it and keep it as simple as humanly possible.
oh, and believe me, I like the ordinance, and I'm all for streamlining stuff. That was just the one thing I was thinking that, people will take advantage of any loophole they can find, and that was the one loophole I was thinking of, so.
Well, the one thing we did actually early on when we started talking about the ordinance was address briefly the home occupation issue. I mean, you want people,
Right,
if they
you
have, if they're actually running a business out of their home, it'd be nice if they could have a sign. So now, again, you don't want to start getting into when you would have to take it down necessarily, how long you can have it up, or exactly where you could put it. So that kind of factored into it as well. And that's a good example of
Yeah.
something, because a lot of them would typically not spend a whole lot of money on a sign.
Yeah, I think we had it in the zoning ordinance
Yep.
specific to home occupations where it was limited to like 2 square feet
It
or
was
something,
2
and
square
had to be
feet that had to
attached
be on the
to the
house,
house, yeah.
which nobody's going to see that. They're not looking for it.
Yeah, so we struck that provision in this process
Right.
of updating the code.
And I think as long as, we do have the provision for keeping the signs from looking tatty, and that would probably be the biggest thing that people would
Yeah.
be concerned about, is somebody has stuck a sign out there and it's been there for a year and you could hardly make it out anymore.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You have that with all kinds of signs,
Yeah.
sadly.
My apologies for
No,
derailing the
no, that's
discussion.
good. I mean, it's good
So-
to know the background of it, too,
Yeah.
since you weren't part of the whole discussion, since it lasted a long time.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is appropriate to bring it up or not, but I had a meeting with Soren today. He kind of gave me a little bit of an education about how planning works in the state of Minnesota. And we kind of had a discussion, and we didn't come to an agreement. I think we are both on different sides about the sign ordinance, and I think I need a little bit more, I need to read up a little bit more before I have made my firm determination. But in his opinion, sign ordinances belong within the zoning code. And in my process of going through this ordinance amendment with you right now, and learning what the procedure is, or trying to figure it out, in my experience coming from the state of Wisconsin, we would have a public hearing for any amendment to the Code of Ordinances. That's not the case in Minnesota that I've come to learn. So I was under the assumption that, well, we would do a public hearing if we're going to amend the ordinance. Well, this sign ordinance is no longer in the zoning ordinance, and thus a public hearing is not required. So I would like to pose the question, and we can have this as an agenda item at the next meeting, or perhaps we could talk about it now, is should we include that, a section within the sign code that is the amendment process? And I would recommend that it would include a public hearing.
So are you saying that you would not want for the council to consider adopting this at its next meeting and just wait and decide whether it should go in the zoning ordinance, be renumbered and put in the zoning ordinance? Because it wouldn't take much to renumber it.
I mean, we could do that. I didn't leave the meeting with Soren today feeling like we were obligated to do that.
Yeah.
I don't even think we're obligated to have a public hearing.
Right.
I think we will. I would recommend that we do, regardless of whether or not we adopt it at council's next meeting or, 2 weeks from now. Or if we, put it forward in January. I just wanted to put that before you, that it's, I've become a little bit more educated than I was last month, and so I wanted to make sure that we knew what we were getting into, so we don't have to crack it open again. But I'm happy to crack it open again if we wanted to do that.
Well, I don't think there would be significant changes to it. I think, we had one, wasn't that long ago that the sign ordinance, we did do a public hearing at the time for the sign ordinance. So this is, I wouldn't think we'd get a whole lot of new input on
Right.
that. It is, I tend to agree that to me, it kind of belongs in the zoning ordinance because it is a land use issue. But by the same token, I don't know that it couldn't just be renumbered at the end, wherever we end the thing now, just like, another section that would just take renumbering what is here and then doing a public hearing and.
That brings to mind another topic that we talked about this afternoon. Signs are not listed as a use in our zoning code, and they're not listed in the use table. So how would you regulate them as a land use? As, in my opinion, it would be an accessory structure. But then that begs the question, can you have a sign on a piece of property where there is no other principal use? And then, no, you couldn't. So it's kind of opening another can of worms in terms of how do we regulate in the community.
Well, let me ask a question then. Do we have off-street parking as a use?
We do.
Off-street parking, or just do we have parking lot? We regulate off-street parking for every use. We regulate it in residential, on a residential property. I don't know that we have it as an accessory use.
That's a good point, yeah.
So I understand what you're saying, but I'm not so certain it would have to be its own separate use. It's related to the use that's going in.
Yeah, off-street parking, I think, is often listed in land use tables as, if a city wanted to have it as a use, as a principal
Exactly.
use. Yeah,
A separate lot,
right.
city-owned, that would be an actual standalone use. I can't imagine a sign necessarily being a standalone use on a piece of property.
Well, there was a question that came up just before our last, I think it was the last or the 2 meetings ago, right before we started meeting, about a possible city sign on a city-owned lot with no other structure. And at that point, I didn't have the time to look into it, determine if it was something that we could do or not.
Yeah.
And so that was another question that kind of came up in
My take
discussion.
was that would be an open space,
Right.
What do adjoining cities
city-owned.
do? Have you looked at that to see what like Maplewood and
In
Venice
terms,
Heights and those folks do?
in terms of how they is it a land use, you mean?
Yeah.
I only became aware of this at 11 o'clock this
Yeah,
morning.
no, I understand completely.
Okay.
I'm just saying maybe that's one thing we can do is take a look at, our neighboring cities and see how they do it and see if there's any, you know,
Well, as far as the
chances are-
sign piece?
Yeah, so as far as the sign piece is.
I looked at some other cities when, gosh, quite some time ago when we were first thinking about doing this, and it's a mix. Some include it right in the zoning code, others have it as a separate,
Right.
little section,
I
but
think
it's under the land use
I think what
piece.
he's asking about is it listed as a specific use in the table? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I'm just wondering how they treat it in general.
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing it
So
as a
with that
use.
spot between, Sidewinders and the other place where it's a city and it says redevelopment available, that would
It's a
be-
parking lot.
Oh, but they've got the sign there.
It's a parking lot. That's how it's used.
But is a parking lot a permitted by right use in that?
Pardon me?
Oh, I was just asking if off-street parking is permitted as a.
Yes, it is. In downtown? Oh, absolutely.
Okay. I haven't
wouldn't
come across
have any
that
parking
question-
lots
Particular question in the downtown yet.
I guess the question I would have is what is a disadvantage to keeping the sign ordinance as its own separate?
Yeah,
That's what I'm still trying to learn. I don't know that I see the difference. I haven't been illuminated yet as to what the disadvantage is.
I mean, the process could still be the same and include a public hearing, so I don't know that it, right now at least, is a big hurdle. Do you think it is?
I'm just asking for clarification on whether or not we should build in the amendment procedure for when we want to tackle amendments to the sign code. We could treat it like any other ordinance that's not a zoning ordinance, and, you don't even have to have a public hearing. I guess that's okay. We could do that. We could, write within the ordinance itself, an amendment to the sign code requires a public hearing before the planning commission, approval by city council. That would be an option. In my experience, you would usually have, in the zoning ordinance at least, the requirements to how you do an amendment. State law usually has those requirements too that you could lean on. But I was surprised to learn that there wasn't those state requirements for me to lean on when it came to ordinance amendments. And hence the discussion that we're having now. So I feel like a sign ordinance is, land use related enough that it should warrant a public hearing. And then maybe that is all where it comes down to in terms of Soren's concern of the legality of having it pulled out of the zoning ordinance.
Guess what? I would like clarity on how these ordinances and codes differ from one another, from the standpoint of, if I was a developer coming into town, what do I have to look at? Are we making it more complicated by having,
Separate?
these 6 different things you need to look at? In this case, we're talking about 2 things. But are we making it more complicated to understand if it's not kind of all in one place?
I don't think so. I think for a user friendliness point of view, having it pulled out the way it is now is much, much better for city officials,
And
the general public.
non-developer types, if it's just somebody who wants to do a sign,
Anybody that
Right.
you can
Then
see
it's
where it
very
is.
easy.
Yeah, it
Right.
is easier.
That's my thought too.
I mean,
I certainly am in favor of us, putting this kind of thing in front of the public, just from the standpoint of, it's, open government looks better. Yes, it does give us the chance to have some fighting in the, between parties, but I think it's always better to say that, we took this to the public and this is what the result was, as opposed to, this is being done by fiat and,
Right.
we're
And it
imposing
affects
this.
everyone,
Yes.
everybody.
Okay. Do we have the general consensus? Okay,
I
so
would concur with that. I think he spoke well.
okay, so I will after the motion is completed, I will then take this as a public hearing on the next step, assuming it has a next step.
So should the motion be, instead of, well, would you want to have the public hearing at the council, or would you want the planning commission to do, because the recommendation right now is the city council approve it. Should the motion be that the planning commission recommends the city council authorize that it hold a public hearing? Because I think that's sometimes been what we've done before, is make a recommendation, to say, authorize us to hold a public hearing. Because it's not addressed any place in code. In the zoning code or in the administrative code for this type of ordinance.
So the action might be recommend city council hold a public hearing.
Or authorize the planning commission to hold a public hearing.
Oh, the public hearing here.
Yeah.
Okay. I think either way.
Because one wouldn't normally be required, and I'm thinking to the way
I don't know that you need authorization to hold a public hearing. I think we can
well,
just have
because
one
it's
if it
not a
is.
policy.
I think we can.
I think the wording in our ordinance that covers governance talks about as directed, the planning commission will hold public hearings as directed or authorized by the council or something like that. And I thought, okay, well, some are directed in code. This one isn't, this type of, that's all I'm saying. Should that be the recommendation?
Well, I was given the impression from my meeting with the attorney today that we could have, you can hold public hearings. You're either required to or you have the option to. I think we can give ourselves
think
the option to at this point.
I think maybe the authorization language is in there only because I think you can probably authorize it. But we don't have authority to spend money, and it costs money. There's the cost of the ad is really what it boils down to for a public hearing. And we don't have authority to say, yeah, we're going to do it. But we think it should be done. So I'm just trying to clarify the motion, how if we need a motion or if you just want to schedule a public hearing or.
You really do have this ordinance memorized. Look at that.
Did I quote it to?
Almost, yeah.
Oh my God, that's kind of scary.
Well, there's the clarity. So, yeah, it says the planning commission shall have the powers and duties given to the city planning agencies generally by law, including the authority to conduct public hearings as directed by city council or city policy.
Yeah, and it's city policy, we don't have one for
I'm not aware of
this.
policy. Yeah, so
Well, you just kind of mentioned that it's not like one that we have to hold one.
but it would be recommended by staff that we have a public hearing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I was just trying to get at, is this the recommended action, the proposed action is to recommend the city council approval of the ordinance. But the staff recommendation in the little packet here says staff recommends. So are you asking the planning commission to make a recommendation? Because if so, it probably would be that you recommend the planning commission to hold a public hearing in January.
Either way.
I'm thinking that's what. It would be.
But we haven't answered the question of should there be something in writing as part of the amendment that actually incorporates the amendment process,
And that could be part
and
of,
thus a public hearing.
Yep, and
Does
if-
that become part of the amendment that we're creating?
If
Is
that's-
what is the amendment process?
Well, if we're going to go that route, then we would need to look at this again
right.
at the next meeting, and then we
But we
would.
haven't really resolved that, and I think that, I mean, it would seem that it would bring clarity to the whole thing, and it wouldn't be this nebulous, oh, did staff say we should have a public hearing, or did the council direct us to, or,
All I'm saying is, I don't
You
think
know
you
what I
need
mean.
that clarity before you do something with the ordinance. Because it's it's possible it could be incorporated into this ordinance, or it just becomes policy.
right, it could be
Then.
just policy, which I think is simpler from
Yeah.
the standpoint, it's just policy that this is what we do.
Right, well, especially for
And
this
then that
this
goes
type
back
of
to
ordinance.
Commissioner Muick's comment, which is the open government thing is a
Right.
good thing to get the public involved. And so if that was just policy, it probably doesn't have to be written into this
Yeah. So anyway,
ordinance.
But who makes the policy? City council?
it's just, well, it's kind of how things go.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's written anywhere. So anyway, let's
Policy
just,
is not to write the policy.
well, there's so many things pop up, you can kind of understand. But this being related to land use, I think this is a little easier call. I could see the liquor license, when we did the liquor ordinance, the council did that. It's like, no, we don't need to get involved in that. But I guess just for the purpose of doing something with this, would the planning commission want to make now I'll just say, would the planning commission want to make a recommendation to the council that, or to staff, or to whoever, that maybe just ask staff to schedule a public hearing, and it doesn't have to go to the council yet?
I would agree with that.
Because then we don't need to make that a recommendation to the council yet. And then after the public hearing, the planning commission can make a recommendation to the council.
Yeah.
Seems like that makes sense.
I think it should stay in the planning commission's court.
There you go.
Makes sense.
Are you-
Let's repeat that. So the motion,
well, it's not necessarily
Does it have to be?
well, yeah, we don't normally make motions to ask staff to do
oh,
something.
No.
so the, okay.
And we
All we're
can't
doing is
direct
putting-
staff.
So the was that a recommendation?
We strongly suggest.
We're suggesting the planning commission hold a public hearing at its next meeting.
Planning commission, got it.
Yes.
Will do.
And the reason I say planning commission is sometimes when, especially something like this, you never know what might arise. And we have far more history with this, and it makes it so tough for the council.
We don't want that, we don't want the council to get in the weeds.
Right.
If you have
Exa-
that kind of situation.
Yeah,
It's our job
yeah.
to bring it to them
Right.
ready to go.
Right.
Yes, exactly. This is really what we're recommending. We're not recommending you figure out what people want.
And then they have to back to us, and it just.
Right.
And then it comes back, and yeah, exactly. That just makes more sense to me.
We
If-
deliver it already landscaped and looking pretty.
Yes. So everybody in agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
So is that it with that item then? So no,
Yeah.
no, okay.
All right. Excellent. Well, that took a little longer. I was planning on being out of here by 7.
Almost.
Sorry, I had to.
No, I'm teasing.
This is good.
That's good. I'm glad. That was actually a good discussion to have. Okay, recognition of outgoing commission members. Nothing special, but we just want to, for certain, say congratulations to our mayor-elect.
Yes.
I think it's pretty special. He's making a leap forward.
That's a big leap. Yes,
Yeah, it's a big
exactly,
Well, you got me
exactly.
started, so.
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, well, you've,
You've been in training.
That's right.
right.
She might be sitting next to me at the meeting, so. Who's that lady next to you? Just be quiet, keep going.
Sitting down on the floor.
Next step on the road to governor, right?
I think the road ends right.
So, congratulations.
Thank you, appreciate it.
I thought it was appropriate, John, that you said you hope to make it as long as the last prime minister of
Yep,
Great
44
Britain.
days.
Oh, Oh, yeah. 3 or 4 days, that's
Well,
pretty
you know, if
good.
you put a head of lettuce out there right now, it'll be frozen for at least the next 3 or 4 months.
Yeah. So, yeah, we don't have a cake or anything, though, sorry.
So,
Appreciate it.
have to have a celebration outside of this meeting.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
all.
So have you heard from Commissioner Geldman?
I have not.
Oh. Okay.
Is it possible I have his email? I mean, I sent him directly that message to ask if he was interested, and I haven't heard about that or about his attendance tonight, so I'm not entirely sure.
Well, maybe he's, who knows? So, yes, I know his term is up. My term is up as well, and I am not asking to be reappointed because I figure I've kind of I've done this long enough, and I think turnover's a good thing. So, I'll miss it in a way, but in a way I won't because it can be a lot of work.
You trying to say I drove you crazy? You're gonna end with me?
Yeah, that was the last straw.
I couldn't take it after that.
Just couldn't do it. So that's it. Excellent. Any old business?
No.
Now it's just a matter of finding other commissioners.
Yeah, well, that'll be the council, Brandy.
It's
Hard at work.
It's my understanding that if we don't have anybody that is interested already, that we put out
A notice of.
a notice, yeah.
That's my recollection,
Yeah.
too.
So I think unless you guys have some friends, colleagues you'd like to round up.
It's just like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
just like you said. at the
Good
beginning,
Open it up,
public-
yeah.
Public is the best, even if we do have people, I think it
Yeah.
should be on the newsletter for people can.
Sure.
So that way it makes everybody feel a part of it. It's
Yeah.
not just,
not
know somebody.
hand-picked people. Yes, exactly, exactly.
Planning cabal.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's potentially 3 open seats, is that the idea?
That's
Yeah.
me.
Well, we don't know about Rick yet, but,
Yeah, I don't know about Rick.
okay.
He hasn't said anything.
Yeah, another 10 years in you, what are you doing?
Pardon me?
Yeah, another 10 years in you, what are you doing?
You're gonna be vice mayor, is that where you're moving?
Right.
Wayne,
Okay,
how long have you been with the planning commission?
15 years.
Wow.
See,
Thank you.
that's
Thank you so
Thank
much.
5
for that.
terms.
Wow.
Now that you, yes, exactly. Wow. It is a big commitment. But that actually, and this is something, and I'm just going to toss it out because it's always occurred to me, is I know some cities actually do have term limits. You can serve this many terms, then you have to be off for at least a year,
Right,
but then
then
you
you could
can,
come back.
then you can come back.
Right.
And I actually think it's something to think through because I think that's not a bad idea. When you get new folks, it really can bring a lot more, different areas of background and ideas and ways of looking at things, and I think that's really valuable. So, something council might want to consider going forward. And I think it also has a potential to increase diversity on our councils. We just don't, other than
Yeah.
arts and culture,
Yeah. Oh, it'd be
very
great to-
homogeneous looking
It would
out
be great
there.
to push for some diversity
Yeah,
with
Yeah.
with new members. That would be terrific. I think.
yeah. And that's where that, reaching out and doing it maybe in ways that we don't typically do it. I mean, I'm not an expert on that piece of it,
Yeah.
but,
Well, we're not having a town newspaper anymore. Our big thing,
Yeah.
I was talking to people when I was campaigning, is we need to use the city website as our town paper.
yeah, I
You need to
know.
check it over and see, and, see what's going on. because
Not
stuff
everybody
should be there.
reads it, and not everybody
Yeah,
goes
leave
to
it
the
on doorstep.
websites.
You can get the paper, but if you don't go out and get it,
Yeah,
I can't blame you,
yeah,
Right.
because you didn't know it was there.
I know.
Well, and we might even try reaching out to, like the Century College and, putting something over there for residents of North St. Paul that attend the school. That
Well-
type of thing, as a way of getting some younger people on here because, it's, other than.
Look at
one
all these
exception-
young people. What are you
Yes.
talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah.
Youngsters.
But then it also brings up what I was talking about too, is, in churches, in anything, they're the same people, but is it the same people because nobody else does it, then you feel obligated to do
Right.
it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's it. where it
exactly.
becomes Sometimes it's not, we would love to have new people, but when we go out
Right.
there, nobody does it.
But I think that, I
Let's
think
hope we can get
recently, more people have been submitting since the council did decide, I can't remember how they solicited was it last year? But they were putting postings out there, and they got, you know, some good responses, and I think that's the way to go about it.
Was Carrie the brain trust of that effort?
Yeah, yeah,
Talk to her.
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway,
Believe me, we don't want to be like, you know, I used to run into this attitude in planners in Texas that there were a lot of problems that could best be solved by a few deaths on city planning commission. Because planning commissions down there tended to be, you know, old white men that had been on them for 20, 25, 30 years, and they weren't about to get off until they died.
Yeah.
So, you know,
it's almost like an entitlement. Hey, I'm on
Yeah,
it. I just want,
exactly.
reappoint me
Yeah.
forever.
Right.
So yeah, I do think it's a good idea.
yeah.
Okay.
I would agree with that even as the youngest by seniority person on here.
Is that a topic we might want to talk about? I mean, is that something that the council decides or the planning commission? I think that's a council decision.
Yeah, that's the council on what the process is for, you know, staffing the commissions. I do know there in the past, one other thing that's been discussed is having the council, if candidates are interviewed, having the council do it, or at least several representatives and not just like the mayor.
Right.
And I think that's a good idea, and even having maybe the commission.
But it's
Or,
officially a mayor appointment, right?
Yes, with the approval of the council.
Right.
But, you know, if all you get is one name,
It's pretty easy.
it's, you know, I mean, from the
that's not-
council, if they're only
Yeah.
told, here's the one person,
Yep.
Yeah, that's not,
then,
that's why I like to see it in the website and everything else, and then the council can take it all in together, and then we decide.
yeah, I think,
Right.
I'll also add
We
that there
already-
are several
Whoa.
other vacancies as well coming up on different commissions. The Arts and Culture Commission has decided to expand their number of commissioners from 5 to 7. It allows them to abide by the open meeting law and still do some work in between meetings. And so we are in the process of those interviews right now. So we have, I think, 3 interviewees for 2 positions. So, and that's been consistent, at least with the arts and culture. We've had more applicants than
yeah,
positions. The EDA will have potentially 4 openings, and then I think here 2 or 3. Did you mention Park Board? Oh, and then Parks and Rec 2. Did you say 2, maybe?
I don't know how many openings.
How many are on there? I heard there's like 9 on the Parks and Rec,
Yeah.
is that right?
Yeah, it's a little wild.
I think that a couple of them will be stepping down,
Do
though.
we want to keep it at 9? How does that work?
council decision.
No, I was just, all right.
I think, yeah, also like a bylaw.
Did you want us to make those decisions?
No, I was just, I was just surprised. 9 seems to be a lot for a commission.
is.
That's
It's
only
a
what I
lot.
was saying is that seems to be quite a bit.
As the junior member here, what happens if we have lost 3 members and we are not able to replace them by the time of our next meeting?
Then you have 4 members,
Then we have 4.
and you need 3, or you need 2 for a quorum, which wouldn't be ideal. Let's put it that way.
So we don't have to have a quorum based on 7, it's based
No.
on the number of members okay.
Yeah.
Right, right. Okay,
We learned a lot here tonight.
yeah, isn't it
Give me
interesting?
a brush up for what's happening.
Oh, I'll be in your ear. Lisa can speak for that.
I think you're a wonderful writer. You write a lot of notes to us. They're very thorough and great points.
I'm dyslexic.
Pardon me?
Remember, I'm dyslexic, so.
Oh, I have to start writing backwards?
Do something.
And upside down.
Yeah, and upside down.
Mirror,
Yes,
mirror
that's what
writing.
I need.
Okay, reports from council liaison.
Yeah, so I think since we've had an election, congratulations again We also have two other council members, Cassidy Schweer and John Norby, that will be joining council.
Jason.
Jason,
yeah.
sorry, Jason. And then swearing is on January 3rd. So we will have a very new council. It looks probably different than it ever has in North St. Paul history. I don't think we have anyone that will be sitting on council that was born, raised, or has multiple generations here. So it is going to be a different makeup moving forward. So, but looking forward to it, and yeah.
Well, you and Commissioner and Councilmember Cole will be the two most experienced.
Yeah.
With what, 2 years? 3?
2 years.
Starting January will be our third year. Yeah, halfway there.
We recognize the senior member.
Yeah.
But we've always done it this way for at least the last 3 years.
Yeah. Won't be any of that anymore.
Yeah.
Nope. And then we have our truth and taxation hearing next week on Tuesday to talk about our levy. We're looking at about an 8.48% levy, which is, I'd say, comparably very reasonable. I think there are some other municipalities in our county that are almost in the 20s or have considered that. So the average is 12.8, so we're looking really, really good in terms of a levy. What we bypassed was an HRA levy and an EDA levy for the year.
Wondering how that bypassing the EDA funding will affect the city.
We're not increasing the levy, so they're already, they will be continuing to, they already have their budget and
So there's money going in, it's just we're not asking for more.
I think they've always levied at the max that an EDA can levy. But I think you
yeah.
decided not to levy for the HRA. Am I correct?
Yeah. I believe we didn't, I'll circle back on that, but I believe so on both. Let me see. But that kind of brings the total about 30% of the total property taxes will be attributed to the city, whereas the school district is 32 and the county about 34. So yeah, and those are mostly my updates.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the big thing, budget.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions they're wondering about from Councilmember Wong? No? Okay. Reports from commissioners. We'll start with you, Andrew.
I will just say congratulations to John, and gonna miss you, Elaine. It's well, miss you too, John, of course, but I didn't mean to say it like that.
Thanks, John. Go now.
No, it's gonna be. We may need you as a coach every once in a while. Maybe.
Advisor.
Yeah, advisor. Yeah.
Consultants get paid a lot more than commissioners. Remember that.
We'll just make her-
I actually worked as a consultant after I retired from my job, and yes, you can really set your own price when you work as a consultant.
Yeah.
But I did mention to Brandy, because I told her, I wasn't going to ask to be reappointed, that doesn't mean I won't be willing to serve as a resource if anybody needs me. I mean, that would be ridiculous to take that attitude. Patrick,
I have no additional reports.
okay.
Same, I congratulate John and I thank Elaine, so.
Okay. Cameron.
Gee, I just feel like a broken record. Congratulations, John, and, Elaine, we'll just nominate you as Chair Emeritus, and,
That's
Right.
That's a new role.
I'll serve as contractor
right.
until you get
Well,
your
no,
full
emeritus,
complement.
Emeritus, you have to do it for nothing.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't do that. See, that would be a problem for me. Okay, well, I don't know how many of you get the St. Paul Dispatch or the paper, but there were two really good articles, I thought, in this past Sunday. And one was, and it dealt with Stillwater and what they're going to try to do about their downtown parking. And I thought, oh, well, I'll just, chop the paper up and bring that in, and I'll leave it with you, Brandy. If, for those of you who might, she can make copies if you didn't see it. But the other was an article about as Gen X, boomers age, both Gen X now and boomers, they confront living alone, and it gets into the housing issue. And it's not just about, the elderly. This really does get into the whole, as the housing prices have gone up with all the new construction, it's pricing people who want to leave their homes, they can't get the same price, and they can't afford to move now to these new places to stay in their own communities. And I thought it was just a really good synopsis of how, as you look at these issues, you really have to try to integrate all these different pieces to come up with solutions that are really going to work for whatever you want, in your city, because you have all these goals, and sometimes they conflict a little bit, so you have to create that balance. So I just thought they were really good. So I'll leave them with you, Brandy. That's all I had, other than I'll mention, because Alan, our former commissioner, is no longer here, that the toy shelf, it's Christmas season. The toy shelf is always looking for donations, and that can be cash or toys. So I'll just point that out. They're in the new digs on, what is it? Second, Sepulveda and Second, is it?
I think definitely second.
It sounds about right,
Yeah,
I think. I can't remember.
I can't remember what the building is
Yeah,
called.
which building?
Yeah, it's the old workforce center.
Okay, yeah, okay. It's a very nice location, and I think they have a sign out there. So I just thought I'd
Yeah.
mention that, because it's,
Same place where the food pantry went into, too?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I've always thought that was just such a wonderful thing to have in the city. You don't see those very often. So that's all I had. So again, been a pleasure working with all of you. I think it's a great group. I think you've got a lot of knowledge base here, and you're willing to question and bring up issues, and I think that's going to serve the council well into the future. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
We don't want to go.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
I
Nay.
We're adjourned at 7:36.
I was waiting for Al to say it, but he
I know.
didn't pipe in.
Yeah.
He wasn't in Zoom.
Yeah.
That was his favorite thing.
Yeah, well, he couldn't hardly. He would
kind
do
of
that in the
expected
middle of a meeting. Had to call him out.